On March 23rd, 2019, I attended an unofficial NRA meeting at the Roadrunner in New River, Arizona. I went into this experience as an advocate for gun violence prevention. And I was very nervous showing up, but I saw a posting online saying that they were holding an unofficial meeting for the NRA. It was 6 o'clock in the evening, and I drove my way up to the Roadrunner, and I walked in. And what I saw around me was about 20 older white men and maybe 5 or so older white women. And all eyes went to me when I walked over and grabbed a seat. Now, normally I'm sure they had a different agenda, but they did have a lot of questions for me. I think originally they assumed I was here to, support the NRA, but when I explained I was doing a project for my cultural diversity class, a lot of eyes narrowed at me. And they said, okay, well, here are our beliefs. And they said, guns aren't the problem, people are. And in my advocacy work, I've heard that a lot. That's a pretty common phrase that people use from the opposing party to what I'm usually rooting for. I explained to them that I was from places like Moms Demand Action and March for Our Lives, and they're very familiar with those groups. I explained my values, and I said, you're right, it is people, but also the accessibility of guns is definitely part of the problem. And all the hands shot up. Everyone started talking at once. And I decided that I was going to listen. And there was a lot of back and forth. And I think I started to see a lot of things from their perspective. And I even saw some people becoming receptive to my points that I was making in retort to theirs. I explained something I call my pool theory, which is that the law in Arizona is that if you have a young child and a pool, you are required by law to have a fence around your pool. And I said, if you have a young child in Arizona, shouldn't you have to have a quote-unquote fence around your guns? It's just as deadly as a pool. And that, I think, hit home with a lot of these individuals because, a lot of them were grandparents and parents, and I know that seemed to really affect them and make them think. I talked to these people for 2 hours. In fact, one of the women actually bought me dinner while I was there, which was very kind of her. And after about 30 minutes or so, everything became a lot more relaxed and a lot more friendly. There were obviously a few individuals there who were still very aggressive that I was there and very opposing of my ideas. But there were also a lot of people who opened up more to me, and even some people who told me some personal stories that they had experienced. They confided in me and they said, I had a family member who was a victim of gun violence and I want to be able to protect myself and my children. And, I said, well, yeah, that's a short-term solution. But in order to solve a problem, we have to get to the root cause of the problem. And they said, yeah, but what am I going to do in the meantime? And so I started to see this different aspect of what I usually saw, which when I see and when I thought of the NRA before, I was thinking of all the people who had showed up to counter-protest every time I had gone to an event. I saw the people who had threatened me. I saw the people who had committed violent crimes against me. And all of a sudden, I was seeing this different side of people that rather than that, were just trying to protect their families. I shared my story with them about being a survivor of gun violence, and I explained that, I didn't do anything wrong, and, if he hadn't possessed a gun illegally, then it probably never would have happened. And there were a lot of people there who empathized with me, and I really appreciated that experience, and there was a lot of understanding that happened. So from a teacher perspective, I understand now more than I did before that these preconceived notions that I had, this idea that I had that all people who support firearms are trying to hurt me and are trying to discredit what I'm saying and my experiences. And I realized that these emotional things that these people are going through can be just as emotional as what I went through. And because we went down different paths in response to what happened to us, it doesn't necessarily mean that they care any less. And I think that applies to more than just the NRA and gun violence prevention. I am sure that at some point down the road in my teaching career, there will be moments where I will meet kids who will disagree with me and who will voice their disagreements with me. And I think now I will try a lot harder and not just dismiss them and say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just being stubborn. Because I think that that's my mindset before this. And I think sharing that sentiment, obviously I'm not going to share the story of me going to an NRA meeting, but sharing that sentiment that we can't just go off what we think we know. Every individual is different. We have to accept individual stories instead of this individual stereotype that can be easy to fall into. I think that enforcing that with students will make my classroom a better, more inclusive space. And I hope that it'll make me a better teacher.